If we look at his political activity, he was a member of Hizb al-Wafd until 1942, and then after falling out with them, he formed another party called Hizb al-Sa'idin. But after 1945, he refused to work for any political parties and actively called for the rejection of these parties, as none of them worked or served the people. He said all these political parties, they're only there for their own sakes, and they're not doing anything for the people, and he rejected all these parties. He saw that none of these parties, they deserved his zeal or his work or his energy, and he decided to work alone against the political corruption that was prevalent at that time, by writing articles and magazines and delivering lectures. And he continued like this until 1953, when he joined Ikhwan al-Muslimin. Now in Egypt in 1952 a revolution took place. A revolution took place in which Jamal Abdel Nasser, the tyrant, he became the leader of the country. And it's important, if we understand Sayyid Qutb, and also if we understand the movement that he was involved in, Ikhwan al-Muslimin, we have to talk a little bit about this revolution. Now, Ikhwan al-Muslimin, the movement, they had a plan in place to cause a revolution. And their plan was to infiltrate the army and to gain officers in the army into the ranks of the Ikhwan. But these officers, they were to form a special group of people. They were not to be directly linked to the Ikhwan, but rather they were to be a secret party in Ikhwan. And so they would hold circles for those officers. And those officers, they were to be under the military wing of Ikhwan at that time, under a man called Mahmoud Labib. Mahmoud Labib, he was in charge of the military wing of Ikhwan, and he was directly in charge of giving circles and tarbiyah to those officers that had decided to join their ranks and that the Ikhwan had managed to infiltrate. Two men were most active in this new secret organization of Ikhwan. They were Jamal Abdel Nasser and a man called Abdul Ra'uf. Yes, Jamal Abdel Nasser himself was a member of Ikhwan, and he was a very influential member in the secret military wing of Ikhwan, the officers of Ikhwan. And in 1944, the first circle was, they had their first usra, or their first circle, and with 5 other officers of the army. In 1946, they gave bay'ah to the Nizam al-Khas, the special organization of Ikhwan, which was called the Ikhwan Officers Club. And nobody knew about this, it was secret. Then they agreed to avenge the death of Hassan al-Banna, who was killed in 1949 by the Egyptian government. So Jamal Abdel Nasser was there, and they agreed that they will avenge the death of Hassan al-Banna, and they also agreed to keep secret the plans to topple the regime. They keep secret that their plans to train the other Ikhwani civilians and to fight the English. And because of security reasons, they changed their name from the Ikhwan Officers Club to the Free Officers, Al-Dubbat Al-Ahrar. It was known as Al-Dubbat Al-Ikhwan, it became Dubbat Al-Ahrar. And then something happened. The secret organization, I said Abdul Nasser and Abdul Ra'uf, they were the most active, but they had a huge split between the two. Abdul Nasser, he wanted to involve other non-Ikhwanis into this secret organization. Whether they're practicing or not practicing, he said we must get all the army involved and cause a revolution. He wanted to do things very quickly. And Abdul Ra'uf, he said no. We will not involve in this organization anyone except who is Ikhwan, is practicing and involved Muslim. And this was a split. Then Abdul Ra'uf, he traveled, and while he was traveling, the leader of the Ikhwan military wing, Mahmoud Labib, he became ill. And he was on his deathbed, and he didn't know who to give all the secrets of Ikhwan to, and all the documents and the treasury information. There's only one man he could give it to, and that was Abdul Nasser. So Abdul Nasser, while Mahmoud Labib was on his deathbed, was given the secrets, because he trusted in him. Ikhwan, all the brothers that were involved in the officers club, the names, the addresses, the treasury, the money that was owed, every single thing was handed down to Abdul Nasser. The secrets of the Free Officers Organization. Now, what is Sayyid Qutb's involvement in this revolution? At that time, Sayyid Qutb was not a member of Ikhwan. And Sayyid Qutb, like everybody else, he thought that Nasir was a good man and was doing what he was doing to fight corruption and injustice. And the articles of Sayyid Qutb at that time, he was writing articles very heavily in newspapers, in magazines, and this shows the importance of the articles. Why was it that these officers were joining Ikhwan secretly? What was the prime reason? The primary reason was because of the articles of Sayyid Qutb. The officers and in the army, they were deeply affected by these articles. And they were encouraged, the Ikhwan would encourage, although Sayyid Qutb wasn't a member, they would encourage their members, especially those of the free officers, to read his articles. And then many of those officers, including Abdul Nasir, would go to the house of Sayyid Qutb to discuss plans for the revolution. And so Sayyid Qutb, he was seen as the main think tank behind the revolution. He was a think tank. From him, all the ideas were, permeating to the rest of the people that were involved in the revolution. And then in 1950, Abdul Nasir, he left the officers and he formed his own organization with other members of the army. He wanted to involve other members of the army, and like I said, the special branch of Ikhwan, they didn't want to do this, so Abdul Nasir split from them and he involved other members of the army and he formed his own organization for the revolution. Now, although Abdul Nasir, he left the military wing of Ikhwan, he continued to make contact with the Da'wah wing of Ikhwan. Now you must realize that the Da'wah wing and the military wing, there's very little communication between them, because it was very dangerous if they find members of the Da'wah wing and the plans of the military wing are exposed, it would be very dangerous. And so there was very little communication between the two. So Abdul Nasir could exploit this weakness in communication, and therefore he began to contact the Da'wah wing of Ikhwan and began to show his sincerity to them. And at that time the Da'wah wing was under the command, under the Murshid Hassan Hudaybi. And like I said, Abdul Nasir kept on having contacts with them, and he said, look, we will help you, we've got generals, we've got officers, and we'll help your organization, and when we get to power, we'll help us in our aims and objectives. And so Abdul Nasir, he said to the brothers that were helping Abdul Nasir, not the military wing, but those of the Da'wah wing, he said that help him on the condition that if he gets to power, he would implement Sharia completely and would be in full cooperation with Ikhwan and would obey them. So if he was to get to power and we were to aid him, if Ikhwan were to aid Abdul Nasir directly, he would implement Sharia and he would aid them. And the Da'wah wing didn't know that the military wing had a split with Abdul Nasir. Yeah? They didn't know this. This was very important information that they didn't know. Then what happened? Abdul Nasir, he took over and he caused the rebellion and the revolution, and by the help of the Ikhwan and on their backs, Abdul Nasir came into power. And then the Ikhwanis, including Hassan Hudaybi, he went to meet Abdul Nasir, and then he reminded him of all the conditions that they had said before. And he was shocked when Abdul Nasir rejected every single condition. He wasn't going to implement Sharia, and he wasn't going to recognize Ikhwan, he was not going to obey Ikhwan, he was not going to help Ikhwan. Okay? All the promises he had made, he had fallen back on. And then what could Hassan Hudaybi do? This man is now in power and the army is with him. So Hassan Hudaybi said to him, we regard you as a reformist movement. He still saw good in him. If you do good, you do so for the people. If not, we will advise you and we will correct you as Allah wills. After the revolution, Sayyid Qutb, he met with Abdul Nasir. Abdul Nasir still hasn't exposed all his plans. And then he would meet with Abdul Nasir and also the officers, sometimes 12 hours a day, formulating plans of how this revolution would become successful. Like I mentioned, Sayyid Qutb was not a member of Ikhwan, and as of yet, he thought the best of Abdul Nasir. And Abdul Nasir, he set up an organization called Tahriri. Okay, he set up an organization called Tahriri. And the reason of this organization was because Ikhwan was very active in the field of da'wah. And Abdul Nasir knew that this was the largest movement around. So Abdul Nasir wanted to form another political organization to counteract and counterbalance Ikhwan. And so he formed this group called Tahrir. And Sayyid Qutb, he didn't realize that this was the plan of Abdul Nasser, and he even helped Abdul Nasser set up this organization. But within 1 month, Sayyid Qutb, he realized the plans of Abdul Nasser. And he realized that Abdul Nasser set up this new group to counteract Ikhwan, and immediately he resigned from this organization. Nasser, he tried to coax Sayyid Qutb into rejoining the organization, being part of the government. He said, we'll give you whatever you want. We'll give you the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Culture, the Ministry of Tarbiyah, the Ministry of anything, any position you want, we'll give you, just be with us. But Sayyid Qutb, he refused all these positions and all these offers. Once he realized that Abdul Nasser became corrupt, he refused every single thing. How is it that Sayyid Qutb, he became a member of Ikhwan? How did he become a member of Ikhwan? He said Qutb, he did not personally meet Hassan al-Banna. There are some accounts that he met Hassan al-Banna, but rahmatullahi alayhi, but he personally did not meet him. He knew of his activities before going to America in 1948. While in America, the Ikhwanis, they had fought jihad in Palestine, and when they returned, they were all rounded up and put in prison. And he wrote his book, which was called Al-Adala Al-Ijtima'iyya. And this book, in the beginning, it says to all the brothers, the mujahids that are fighting in the way of Allah. So a lot of the Ikhwanis, they thought that this book was written for them. And this book was circulated in prison and was widely read by a lot of the Ikhwanis. Although Sayyid Qutb, he was not a member of Ikhwan by then. Imam Hassan al-Banna, when he got a copy of this book, he said, these are our ideas, and it should be that he is one of us. It should be that he is one of us. Okay? هذه أفكارنا وينبغي أن يكون هو أحد منا. Now, whilst in America, Sayyid Qutb, he got to know of Zionism, and he got to know the hatred that the kuffar had for Islam and the da'wah. Especially at that time, the movement of Ikhwan. And then two incidences got him closer to the Ikhwan.